Once again, it's time to step into 1969 and take a look at some of the standout records that were hitting the shelves in April of that year. So without further ado, let's begin.
Can you look around you now and tell us what's to be?
April 1969 saw the release of the first album by Chicago Transit Authority, who shortly after changed their name to just Chicago. It was an ambitious double album right from the start, introducing a sound that mixed rock with jazz, blues and soul, and driven by a powerful horn section that set the band apart from most of their contemporaries. It was a very ambitious debut, especially considering its length, and it shows a group already confident in combining different genres into a cohesive sound. A big part of the album's appeal is Terry Kath's guitar work, which was heavily influenced by Jimi Hendrix. But even Hendrix himself was impressed, and in an interview shortly before his death in 1970, Hendrix called Terry Kath one of the best guitarists in the universe, which says a lot about his ability. The album was released in April 1969 and it became what the industry usually calls a sleeper hit. Upon release, it was initially unsuccessful, but it eventually turned into a success, reaching number 17 on the Billboard chart in 1971, 2 years after it was first issued. The album remained on the Billboard chart for 171 weeks, surpassing the previous record for a rock album's longevity of 155 weeks, which was set by the Beatles' White Album. And the record also became a major success in Britain, where it peaked at number 7 on the UK Albums Chart.
Try and think too different. Now what we say is best. Listen, little man, you're no better than the rest.
Taste were formed in Ireland in 1966 and led by Rory Gallagher. After a few lineup changes, the group moved to London in 1968 and got signed to Polydor. Their self-titled debut album was released in April 1969. And it captured the raw energy of the young trio, mixing strong bluesy influences with the heavier sound that was beginning to dominate the British scene in the late 60s. One of the standout tracks is Blister on the Moon, which had already been released as a single in April 1968.
Now you lay you down to sleep, make sure and get some rest. Tomorrow is another day and you must pass the test.
Given its early release, its heaviness is particularly striking, and it stands as one of the more powerful and forward-looking tracks from that period, anticipating the heavier sounds that would become more prominent in the years that followed. Upon release, the album didn't achieve major commercial success, but it helped establish Taste as an exciting live group, and it laid the foundation for the recognition Rory Gallagher would later go on to achieve.
Now and then we just lay here together and smile. 2 pieces of grass in an acre of corn.
Faintly Blowing is the second studio album by British psychedelic group Kaleidoscope, not to be confused with the American band of the same name. The record captured the band's continued development following their debut album from 1967, and it reflects the broader experimentation taking place in the British psychedelic scene in the late 60s.
Come on, the unbelievers, break the bread and drink the wine. Give her your fainted breath for love, that's always time.
He speaks in silence and not like the boats are burning and love like
Musically, the record blends whimsical lyricism, baroque pop textures, and exploratory psychedelic rock with touches of folk. resulting in a sound that is richly textured and with a distinctly British psychedelic sensibility.
Rainbows faintly blowing. Rainbows faintly blowing. The electric midnight mist is dancing through the trees as the organ grinder's ghost is feeling lonely.
The album didn't achieve significant commercial success at the time, but it stands as one of the essential British psychedelic recordings from the late 60s. It's a truly brilliant record that, just like their debut album, deserved far more recognition. Shortly after the release of the LP, the group changed its name to Fairfield Parlour and went on to release an excellent record for the Vertigo label in 1970 called From Home to Home.
What would you do if I sang out of tune? Would you stand up and walk out home?
Joe Cocker's debut album introduced him as one of the most distinctive voices to emerge from the British scene. The record was produced by Denny Cordell, and it was largely built around reinterpretations of well-known songs, all reshaped through Cocker's gritty and soulful vocal style. Cocker's version of the Beatles' title track is one of the standout moments of the album. The song had already become a #1 hit in Britain when it was released as a single in October 1968, and it became a defining performance that helped establish his reputation internationally. The album also includes strong interpretations of songs such as Feelin' Alright by Traffic, along with covers of Bob Dylan tracks and a few originals.
Life is too short, you just get caught, Marjorie.
Joe Cocker was backed by an impressive lineup of musicians, with contributions from several notable names of the era, including Jimmy Page, Steve Winwood, and Albert Lee, along with musicians associated with bands such as Spooky Tooth and Procol Harum. The album showcased Cocker's ability to completely reinterpret familiar material in a way that felt fresh and personal, and over time it has come to be regarded as a strong debut that captured the essence of his early sound. The record reached number 27 in Britain and number 35 in the United States. On the Threshold of a Dream was the fourth studio album by the Moody Blues, and just like its predecessors, it was a concept album, although it followed a looser theme than their previous two records.
So blind that surely they see there's a much better way for them to be.
Turned on to the same word. Have you heard?
The album was a major commercial success, becoming the band's first #1 album in Britain, and it also boosted their American fortunes by becoming their first album to reach the top 20 in the States. Overall, On the Threshold of a Dream stands as one of the key releases in the Moody Blues classic period, capturing a band at the height of their creativity. And just like several records from 1969, it bridged the psychedelic sounds of the late 60s with the progressive style and approach that would become more prominent in the early 70s.
I may be wrong, but I'm not wrong.
April 1969 also saw the release of the second album by the Nazz. The group was formed in Philadelphia in 1967 and led by bassist Carson Van Osten and guitarist and main songwriter Todd Rundgren, who would go on to enjoy a successful solo career later in the 70s. The group was heavily influenced by British bands such as the Beatles, the Yardbirds, The Who and Cream, something that was already evident on their 1968 debut album. And because of their love for British sounds, the Nazz planned to record their second album at Trident Studios in London. However, the sessions were cut short due to issues with the musicians' union, so the LP ended up being recorded in Los Angeles. The album was finally released in April 1969, and its recording was marked by tensions and musical differences within the group. Around this time, Todd Rundgren began writing more piano-based material influenced by singer-songwriter Laura Nyro, which didn't sit well with the rest of the group and clashed with their established sound. The album was originally intended as a double LP, but by the time it was completed, the band had already broken up, and it was reduced to a single album, with much of Rundgren's piano-driven material left off the final release. The record wasn't a success, and it only managed to reach number 88 on the Billboard album chart, but just like their debut, it's a solid LP that later gained renewed attention when Rundgren's solo career took off. And their blend of melodic pop songwriting with a more aggressive performance style has led many critics and fans to regard them as early pioneers of what would later be known as power pop.
Lay, lady, lay, lay across my big breast bed.
Nashville Skyline by Bob Dylan marked a significant shift in his sound and image. The record expanded on the stripped-down, rustic sound he introduced on John Wesley Harding, and it displayed a complete immersion into country music, with simple song structures, warm arrangements, and a relaxed domestic feel. One of its most striking features was his vocal style. Dylan adopted a much smoother and softer crooning voice, which was quite different from the nasal tone he had used on his earlier records. The album includes some of his most accessible and melodic material, with songs like Lay Lady Lay becoming one of his best-known hits. And it also features a notable duet with Johnny Cash.
If you're traveling in the North Country Fair.
Nashville Skyline was both a critical and commercial success, reaching number 3 in the United States and giving Dylan another number 1 album in the UK. Overall, the record stands as one of the most distinctive and surprising turns in Dylan's career, showing his ability to reinvent himself and helping pave the way for the growing popularity of country rock in the late 60s and early 70s. The success of bands like the Rolling Stones and the Yardbirds in the mid-60s helped spark interest in the music of bluesmen like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf. And later in the decade, the so-called blues revival, which was spearheaded by bands like Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, once again brought attention to the two bluesmen. So in response, Chess Records decided to team up both Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters with members of a Chicago psychedelic band called Rotary Connection, and the result was 2 albums of experimental psychedelic blues. The Muddy Waters album was called Electric Mud and was released in late 1968. The record by Howlin' Wolf, on the other hand, was simply titled the Howlin' Wolf Album and released several months later in April 1969.
I'm a tail drag, I'll wipe out my son. I got a little red rooster to lay the grover down.
Neither artist was particularly pleased with the direction of these recordings, and Marshall Chess even alluded to Howlin' Wolf's dissatisfaction with the arrangements on the album's cover. But the record includes several strong and enjoyable moments, and the blend of blues with psychedelic elements works remarkably well on several tracks.
Cut bells full of diamonds. Cut bells full of gold. Because I'm built for comfort, I ain't built for speed.
Unfortunately, unlike Electric Mud by Muddy Waters, which sold 150,000 copies within the first 6 weeks of release and became his first album to appear on the Billboard and Cashbox charts, the Howlin' Wolf album was not a success. Both albums were initially criticized by blues purists, but over time they have developed a cult following and are now seen as intriguing experiments, combining traditional blues with psychedelic effects, wah-wah guitars, and fuzz-driven textures. Another artist who benefited from the renewed interest in the blues during the late 60s was Johnny Winter, who released his second album in April 1969. The record showcased his blistering guitar work, powerful vocals, and deep roots in traditional blues, mixing Delta-influenced styles with a raw and electrified sound. and it features a mix of original songs and blues standards which highlight Winter's slide guitar and his commanding presence. Johnny Winter's second album reached number 24 on the Billboard Albums chart, and the record stands as a strong early statement, capturing his blend of Texas-inspired blues and rock-driven energy at a time when he was rapidly gaining attention from both audiences and critics.
'Cause I was born lonely, down by the riverside, learned to spin fortune wheels and throw down.
Ramblin' Gamblin' Man was the first studio album by the Seger System. The record mixed raw hard rock and psychedelia, and was driven by Seger's gravel-voiced vocals, along with heavy organ riffs and a gritty and energetic sound that captured the band's roots in Detroit rock.
Time of your years, the young thoughts in your dreams, while you live on the wind, how lovely it all seems. Go ahead and call me yellow. 2 + 2 is on my mind. 2 + 2 is on my
The album's title track, Ramblin' Gamblin' Man, was a top 20 hit, reaching number 17 on the Billboard Singles chart and helping give Seger his first national exposure.
But I got to ramble, rambling man.
And the album itself also made the Billboard 200, peaking at number 62. The album was an energetic early statement from Seger, and it captured his raw rock power while setting the stage for the long and successful career that would follow. I hope you enjoyed this trip back to April 1969. See you next time.